Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Eric Rawlinson, Honorary Treasurer of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and your host. Viewers, thank you for joining us this morning. As you know, our club does a great job of providing a forum for business, political, and cultural leaders to share their ideas with us. Today's special guests and panelists are a fine example. Let me take a moment to acknowledge the generous support of our event sponsors, EY and Torrey's LLP, represented by Les Viner. Thank you for your support. Now let me introduce the format of our event today. We will start with a brief presentation from our World Bank Group representatives. After their remarks, we will invite the panelists to weigh in. Canada's pension system is generally regarded as a model. It comes as no surprise, then, that the World Bank collaborated with Canadian pension experts in the formulation of its report. At this time, I would like to turn the club podium over to Christine Hogan, the Executive Director for Canada, Ireland, and the Caribbean for the World Bank. Christine has been in the role since November of 2016. She is a former Deputy Minister of International Trade, and we are delighted to have her here today. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It is really a pleasure to be here today with such a distinctive audience of prominent players and decision makers from across Canada's pension system. Let me begin by expressing my appreciation to the Canada Club Toronto for hosting the event and for offering the opportunity to discuss such an important topic, the evolution of the Canadian pension model. In my role at the World Bank Group as Canada's Executive Director, it is not uncommon to hear reference made to Canada's pension model and the desire of many more people to learn from the Canadian experience. This would, of course, ring true and ring familiar for my colleague and predecessor at the World Bank, Terrie, who's going to moderate our discussion this morning. I hear reference frequently made to the Canadian pension model in a way that suggests that it is a single system with a singular approach, or that the Canadian pension model in its current state reflects how it has always been. However, the reality, as you know, is that the Canadian pension model has evolved over time. It is iterated with continual improvement and adjustments, as described in the study being launched today. In this context, I would like to express my very deep gratitude to everyone involved with the production of this case study, and in particular, each of the pension funds represented as panelists today for their important contributions and leadership, not only in managing these funds, but also for taking the time to share these experiences with the wider international community. I'm confident that the study will be a useful tool for the World Bank Group, its client countries around the globe, and with other key partners. It is now my very distinct honor to introduce our special guest this morning, the Managing Director and Chief Financial Officer of the World Bank Group, Mr. Joaquim Levy. It is even more of a privilege to introduce him to you here in Canada. In his current role, he was responsible for the financial and risk management strategies of the World Bank Group. But prior to joining the World Bank Group, Joaquim Levy held many high-ranking positions in the public sector, including as the Minister of Finance of the Government of Brazil, as Secretary of Finance in the state of Rio de Janeiro, and as Secretary of Brazil's National Treasury. And from 2010 to 2014, he was the CEO of Bradesco Asset Management. In my 1 year at the Executive Board of the World Bank Group, I can attest to Mr. Levy's concerted effort to engage with key decision makers in Canada's financial sector, including many of the Canadian pension funds. This is, in fact, his third visit to Toronto in his current role. Joaquim, welcome back to Toronto, and my very personal thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, all. I'm really delighted to be here for the launching of this report, the evolution of the Canadian pension model. And as Christine mentioned, evolution is an important word in this title. And I really would like to thank Christine for the great role that she and her office have played in helping make this report happen. And the same for the Government of Ontario, which has also been a very important champion for this effort. I also would like to acknowledge Alex Mather, Jonathan Weisstub, that was just talking a few minutes ago, of Commonwealth, and of course Mahmoud Nanjin, Associate Deputy Minister of the Ontario Ministry of Finance, for developing the concept and bringing together a great group of people to contribute to this report. They have done really an outstanding job, and by showcasing the journey that funds have been on in the past 30 years. As many of you know, the World Bank focuses on two main objectives: ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity in a sustainable way. So pension funds are a very important part of this strategy because they have an obvious and direct role to play, ensuring that people have income, adequate income in old age. So it's part of our strategic actions to support the development of good quality pension funds around the world. Of course, pension funds also have an important role as allocators of capital, which makes them doubly important for us. We are in the process, therefore, to develop a series of reports to follow the focus that we have in today's panel on Canada, led by Fiona Stewart and William Price. Maybe they... over there, they're over there. We're going to have reports covering also very interesting experience in Malaysia, Kosovo, the US, and Turkey. These reports will be released in the coming months, and we really very much look forward to bring them all together in a joint report that we should issue at our spring meetings in April, next April. So I think that the case studies that the Canadian government case studies that we're launching today, they give developing countries a unique insight into the experience from Canada over the last 30 years. Because the starting point is by far quite familiar to same countries, and people will not sometimes expect that this was the case also in Canada, looking at where we are now. But we would have a starting point of a poor governance and political interference, lack of investment expertise within the funds, mandatory investment in non-marketable government securities, and the lack of scale, which also meant higher costs. In addition to outdated administration systems. So these are the kind of situation that leads our clients to ask for help. And what the report shows that there is no single solution, silver bullet, but rather a continuous effort that brings consistent and also a few key points that are essential to success. And I focus on two of them. One is governance, and the other is risk management. I think governance is perhaps the single most important factor, which of course covers a number of other aspects, and their independence is independence in particular from political interference is really one of the key principles that you're going to see are highlighted in the report. So independence, of course, has to be supported by legislation and also by the appointment of independent boards that will really work as trustees. And how should the board be structured? What we learned from the experience is that actually the chair really sets the tone, and it's very important. And of course, you need to have mechanisms for accountability, for transparency that should be built in the overall structure of the banks. The second, key factor is really the management of risks and liability. I think that we have seen the rising importance of a chief risk officers. Actually, you have seen this also in the World Bank. And then when I was in the private sector, certainly when I was CEO, I put a lot of effort in getting the CROs, the chief risk officers, to have the authority to really discipline and ensure that we get this stronger governance. I would say that more than the role is a culture. And when this is infused with this culture, we are much more protected. You can take bolder actions, but with an adequate framework. And I think these two messages are extremely important when we talk to other countries. And in this sense, I think it's also remarkable, and we're extremely thankful that several of you are interested in really getting involved and shared your experience. OP Trust has recently been in Vietnam and shared experience, and I think this is an extremely positive development. Actually, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, the CPPIB, has also been involved in this type of endeavor, and I really encourage that others in the audience get engaged, because I think the returns are very positive, and this is a culture that is definitely worth its spread. And in this sense, let me just say a few words about the other aspect, which is the funds, which is the broader benefits also in terms of the fact that Canadian pension funds are in the forefront of this investment abroad in a systematic, long-term, structured way. We at the World Bank, as a part of our strategy for development, we do believe that you need the private sector operating things, but also the private capital. Governed by themselves, you all know, we will not be able to finance infrastructure, to finance a number of things that are essential to ensure long-term development. At the same time, if you get patient, disciplined capital going to these places, you really can unlock a lot of possibilities and solve, I think, two interlinked problems, which is in a certain sense the excess of capital that you have around the world, so the low interest rate environment, and also the demographics, as you move and invest in countries that have a younger demographic than here and all other developed countries. So we are very much engaged in these efforts, using our balance sheet, using our ability to dialogue with countries. And I think, in my experience, and Chris mentioned that I personally and the World Bank has been quite involved with Canadian pension funds, because your participation and most recently engaging and partnering with some of the pension funds in these countries has been extremely positive, and is a tremendous example of what you can achieve with this partnership between capital experience across the world. And also how you have to address some barriers to achieve that. And this is part of our mission as a multilateral development bank. And this is why we've been working in Colombia. You have there wonderful projects in roads, hospitals in Turkey. You have the whole thing, power generation in Vietnam. Many opportunities where, again, you focus very much in making the risk of these opportunities compatible with the risk capacity of institutional investors like pension funds. And your experience is extremely valuable for us in designing our policies and really motivating this dialogue and producing instruments, financial instruments, how you can use our balance sheet to help in this progress. So let me stop here and really thanks again all of those involved in this endeavor, in this report. Really looking forward to continue to work with you in sharing the experience of this journey of excellence that you see in Canada, also as a tool to deepening capital markets in many of these countries. And let me now introduce our panel and offer my thanks to Jim, to Hugh, Kim, and Kevin for coming here today and helping explain how you all have created some of the most respected pension programs and pension plans around the world. And of course, Terrie, the wonderful availability of helping us, and with her experience also in the World Bank. Thank you, all of you in advance for this great panel that you're going to have now.
This one's
Are you beside me, Hugh? Thank you.
I think so. Left and right can be relative. I guess I was about to make a living.
Thank you, Joaquim, and thank you. Welcome back to Toronto. And Christine, it's always great to have you in the city. I wanted to thank you all for joining us here today and echo the comments that Joaquim made. I love this paper. I love what this paper brings because it's a reflection of what we do best. I think sometimes when we have public policy expertise in the private sector, regulators and government and international organizations working together. But more importantly, it took a lot of time and effort on your part to make yourself available to Jonathan and Alex and Mahood, and we really appreciated that because I think that this paper is really a must-read for people who are in public policy and looking at doing things right in terms of making new inroads in stabilizing and going out and making sure that we've got stability and structure in some really exciting public pension funds going forward. As you know more than anybody else, other than the purchase of a home, a person's pension is the most important thing that they own. So being part of a pension plan really reflects that. So I thought I'd start, first of all, with Kevin, who's the newest member of our pension family in Canada. And I would love you to talk a little bit about your expertise and what you're seeing in Alberta and what you think your perspectives are coming from the United States and heading up a really a very strong pension company in Alberta.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Terrie. I want to start first by thanking the Canadian Club for hosting, thanking the sponsors, and seconding what you said, congratulating the folks that put this report together. It was a pleasure to play a part of it. AIMCO is the new kid on the block. We're just celebrating our 10th anniversary. In fact, next month we will bring all of our former board and the current board members in and have a wee party to celebrate being 10 years old. I think we benefited greatly for being able to walk in the shadow of some of the first movers, particularly in the founding of AIMCO. So we could learn from the things that were done better and the things that had been done perhaps less good, because setting that foundation stone, setting the governance structure at day one is critically important. And as the opening remarks stated, having the right balance between independence of governance and accountability to all the stakeholders is sort of like the magic triangle. Without that, it's hard to build upon it. I think the interesting thing about AIMCO is that we have virtually all of the same benefits of great governance, of adequate scale, of patient capital that our Toronto-based and sometimes larger, sometimes much, much larger peers have. But we're based out in Western Canada. And many people think that means that we have a distinct disadvantage because we're a 4-hour flight from the center of the universe. But what I've found is that while we have to shift our strategies, particularly our strategies for attracting and developing talent, we have to have more of a tilt towards growing our own talent, because we can't poach people from across the street, because there isn't anyone across the street in our industry. This is such a global investment environment that I feel virtually no competitive disadvantage. Now, having said that, we have an office here in Toronto. We have offices in London, and we're quite mobile. But we sometimes compete with our peers, and other times we cooperate with them in almost an equal measure. That's another one of the secret secret weapons, if I can call it a weapon, of this particular peer group, is the ability to trust each other and work collaboratively when that's appropriate.
Thank you. Kim, obviously, I think you're the most popular. I think everybody knows about the case, and you're actually engaged in some really exciting things on the infrastructure front. And I know that one of the things that the report goes into and that you've been talking about recently is your investments in the new subsidiary that you've created at the case. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you're thinking and what you're looking at in terms of the infrastructure investments, and how you feel about the debate that's happening, especially in Ontario, to be honest with you, about the whole notion of whether or not some facilities should be privately owned, publicly owned, how we get public buy-in for that, especially when we've had past problems and issues in respect to that, and how we go forward on the infrastructure front, both in terms of an investment for your clients, but also in terms of building up community support.
Thank you, Terrie. You're talking about our subsidiary, CDPQ Infra, which was created back in 2015. So it's a subsidiary of La Caisse. And it's frankly a whole new model in terms of what it represents. So we've created this subsidiary to plan, design, build, operate, finance our own infrastructure investments and projects. So on that front, it's revolutionary in one sense, because it's something very new that's being done. The first project is our electric rail, the REM. I can't wait to ride it. What that has allowed us to do is think differently and work differently. But as the report correctly points out, it really necessitated an evolution. We could not have done this from the onset. It had to be over a longer period of time. Frankly, we think it's the natural evolution of 17 years of investment in infrastructure that allowed us to create this and to attract global talent. A bit to your point, how this credibility in the market and 17 years of investment in infrastructure allowed us to do this and to attract global talent to bring it forward. For the first project, the one I mentioned, we see it as, frankly, a win-win for all the stakeholders that will be involved, whether it's our pensioners, depositors, the government, the public, investors like us, for models like this one. And we are sensitive to some of the issues you raised, including the never-ending debate on tolls and other sensitive issues. I think the way we've approached our project with CDPQ Infra, and the way we have done as well in our investment in the Canada line that you must be familiar with, the Vancouver, to really have an open mind and transparent exchange with the different stakeholders, listening to the public, open houses. We've made significant changes to the project following such feedback from the public. We've added 3 stations. We made different changes to the project based on that feedback. So this is how we want to continue to do things. And frankly, the model we hope will be very successful here and will go into different markets as well.
We could only wish to have the same thing in Toronto. We're gonna get there.
But I'd like to take the Pearson Express.
You can't have
I
like it. Jim, one of the things that I think everybody in this room was quite aware of is the impact of the financial crisis in North America, but also worldwide. I think sometimes we forget the severe impact it had in the United States. We don't go through a situation in this country where we see people, our next door neighbors, that have foreclosure signs on their front lawn. I think we're all now coming to grips with the magnitude of the repercussions of that. But, one of the things we have to say is no pension fund reacted better and stood stronger during that process than Hoop did. And I know you're a modest person, but I'd really love you to talk a little bit about what went on during that period of time and what the lessons learned were for you during that period of time, because it was really quite remarkable how well Hoop stood up during that period of time, and especially considering your governance structure with both labor and management at the table. So wouldn't mind if you talk a little bit about that time.
Sure. We started on the path. So Hoop is well known globally for our approach to investing, which we describe as liability-driven investing. So it's, which really is a risk management strategy, and that all started out of the tech meltdown we saw in 2000, 2002, and we had at that time. We had a severe decline in equities, so our assets went down in value, and we also had a big decline in interest rates, which caused our liabilities to go up in value, or the present value of our liabilities to go up in value. So we went very quickly from having a surplus to a deficit, and so when we did a postmortem on that, we looked at it and we found that the risk between the most of the risks that created that problem was mismatch between assets and liabilities. And at that time, it was kind of accepted in the pension world that that's just what it was, and that you kind of invested half your money, 60% of your money in stocks and 40% in bonds, and everything was going to work out fine. Which, if you stress test that, you find that's actually not correct. So we then tried to think about how we could restructure the portfolio to better match assets to liabilities and reduce that risk. So we essentially created a different portfolio structure, which was liability matching portfolio, which essentially contains a bunch of assets that act like our liabilities, which are essentially interest rate sensitive assets and inflation sensitive assets. And then we overlaid that with a whole bunch of derivative strategies, which gave us additional return that allowed us to meet our objectives. So we actually had that took place over about a 5-year period. And we actually implemented that in December 2007, which was fortuitous, but it's we weren't trying to be market timers, but it was driven by the right motivations, which was to try and control risk. And we recognized that the sort of three factors that can take a plan down, or your funding stats down, which is a decline in long-term interest rates, decline in equity markets, and an unexpected rise in inflation. And we've actually seen two of those big risks play out over that period of time. So when we had in December 2007, we actually took 30% of our money out of equities and redeployed that money into real estate, which is an inflation-sensitive asset, and to long-term bonds and real return bonds. So so the next year, actually, when they it was funny, I mused to our board at the time that we're going to look very different from everybody else. So maybe it'd be good for us to have a decline in equity markets next year, so we look good. So I guess the message is be careful what you ask for, but wish for. So I wasn't expecting a 2008 situation, but in any case, we actually withstood that crisis very well, and liquidity management is something we focus a lot on because of our use of derivatives, and so we have a very liquid portfolio at the time. So actually, 2008 actually was kind of played into our hands in the sense that we had a lot of liquidity, and we're very long-term investors. We have a very long-term time horizons, 50 to 70 years. And the best time for us to buy long-term assets is when they're on sale, which is like they were in 2008. So we had liquidity, so we were able to be on the right side of that transaction. Rather than being a seller, we were a buyer. And so that actually benefited us for quite a period of time after. But I think the whole message is that it really is driven by risk management and understanding what the risks are within pension plans and positioning yourself in a way that's you're going to control those catastrophic risks and try and take other risks that are not catastrophic.
That's great. Thank you. Hugh, at OP Trust, I think it's safe to say that one of the biggest issues that's happening right now is how we deal with some of the economic challenges that we've got. One of them involving labor, which is so interesting for both you and Hoop in terms of how you work with labor. I think those are best practices. I think that's one of the great lessons that come out of this report. But one of the other things that's happening right now is I remember when I worked at the Department of Finance, we had a chief economist that many of you probably know, Don Drummond, who used to remind everybody all the time that the age of retirement, when it was picked at 65, was conditional on the average age of an average man being 67, which we now know that is no longer the case, thank God. But in a world where we are now having people live for 20, 30 years in retirement, which was never, ever foreseen when we were dividing these plans. What are the challenges and what are the planning structures that you need to deal with in terms of dealing with those new demographic challenges?
Well, first of all, really welcome the opportunity to be here and to have been part of this study. OP Trust is a jointly sponsored plan. So half of our trustees are appointed by the province, which is our government sponsor. Half are appointed by the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, which is our union sponsor. And I think our governance structure works really well because our trustees, when they come to the table, you can't tell which side they're from because their focus, their laser focus, is on the issue of ensuring that the member interests are fully protected. We deal with demographic issues and we deal with risk issues in a whole variety of ways. First and foremost, we make sure that we take risk in a purposeful and efficient way. A line I've used more than once because Jim and I are often on panels together is OP Trust and Hoop worship the same God. It's just a different religion.
Great line.
The difference in our religion is we have more exposure to illiquid assets than Hoop does in the form of private equity infrastructure and real estate, but our investors over time have shown skill, and we've taken steps to make sure we've also hedge the portfolio against interest rates. The other thing that's important to us as an organization is the whole issue of innovation and making sure that we understand what's going on in the new economy, both in terms of how it's affecting our membership base, keeping on top of that so that we can be responsive to our member interests and needs, no matter where they are in the age cycle, and we perform those roles. And we also make sure, we've also taken steps recently to be a participant in the innovation economy. And that's one of the things that's important to us about working with institutions like the World Bank. OP Trust sees itself as a global pension citizen. We see ourselves in that role because that helps us better secure the retirement income of our members, because we are a global investor. But the other thing that's important in terms of working in partnership with countries in the emerging world, and we really want to get involved in capacity building in the emerging world, we think this is important because those in the emerging world, they're much quicker at adopting new and innovative technologies, and we want to understand those technologies better. We want to understand how they're going to affect how we do business, how we invest, and how it ultimately is going to affect our society here in Canada and in Ontario. So that's why we see ourselves as a global pension citizen in working to protect the retirement income security of our members.
That's great. Thank you. That also allows you to catapult on these demographic changes a lot better as well, which is a really interesting part. Going back to something that is all through the report, and I'm glad, Jonathan, I finally got a proper copy of it rather than the paper things I've been holding on to, but it's a great report. But one of the things it really talks about is governance and how important governance is, and quite frankly, it's really honest about the trials and tribulations that everybody has gone through on the governance side, which I think is a great thing for emerging markets in terms of best practices. But Kevin, you've gone through some governance issues recently in Alberta, and also Alberta is going through some challenging economic times. And I just wonder if you could talk about that in relation to both of those mixes playing for you in terms of your planning.
Yeah, happy to. First, the second point. Alberta has gone through some challenging times. And Jim, you had good market timing. I think when I agreed to move to Alberta, oil was at 90. And by the time I actually moved my bags in, it was down to 30. And that has an impact. But the real fact of the matter is that we invest globally and we have to compete for investment talent globally. But we also have to thrive and interact at a provincial level with what's going on politically. And so we have to reconcile both of those. We can't let one lead the other. And that's one reason why governance is so important. So a good example in AIMCO's case is that we are a line item on the provincial budget. So while we are, our governance structure gives us ample independence from political maneuvering, we nonetheless have to operate within that reality that we're a line item on the budget and we have to be in some way accountable for that line item. So the dance, I call it the dance that we have to do in an environment when times are tough in Alberta, but we still need to defend doing what's right for AIMCO and for the pensioners and other clients that we represent is sometimes difficult. And so the foundation stone, as I called it, of governance is critically important. We have had a challenging year with regard to the relationship between AIMCO and the current government in Alberta around our governance. I'm pleased to say that those challenges are behind us. But a lot of it had to do with very fundamental issues of how are new board members selected, who holds the sort of balance of control in different points in that continuum. Because any of you who have boards know that it's a continuum that starts with collecting as many potential people as possible, and you end with one or two names at the end. And I won't bore you all with that, the foment that went on between ourselves and our shareholder, because the government of Alberta owns us. But for some of our existing board members, it felt a bit like a crisis. And so I was very proud to see this board come back to the realization that those cornerstones are so critically important. There's a lot of areas where compromise is necessary and right, and they continue to press that this is not an area where compromise is right.
It's great. And actually, I think that this report actually helps make that case for you, too. So it's actually great that you were participating in it, because I think it's actually best practice for all of us. And we have to remind ourselves, we went through this when we created the CPPIB, how important that governance structure is, and there needs to be a balance. But at the end of the day, the most important thing are the pensioners that we're actually going to be supporting. So I'm glad you're on the other side of it.
Me too.
But we still have to fight it all the time. Kim, I wanted to get back to what the case is doing in some of the emerging markets. There's no doubt for anybody that goes to Asia, when you witness the investments that they're making in infrastructure, you know that there's, different set of regulations and obviously that they have to, challenges they have to do. But the question for us is, should we be learning? What are the lessons learned that we can learn from Asia that we can take back here? How can we engage a little bit more on the infrastructure front in terms of being able to scale up what we're trying to do in Canada, while also using it as an opportunity for our pension plans to actually gain international experience and be exposed to emerging markets and different technologies?
The way we go about doing it with Asia and frankly across the globe is to partner with people, platforms, investment platforms, and finding partnerships with people that share our values, have our same mindset. And we've created an infrastructure platform, for example, in India, in the energy infrastructure space. It's something we continue to build on and want to do more of. We've opened offices in Singapore, Shanghai, a small office in Beijing, Delhi. We were present in Sydney for a while. So really expanding and learning how to do things with these great partners and to learn from one another. And finding we're not chasing deals per se, we're really chasing partnerships and relationships with the right people where there are growth opportunities for us to do investments with.
And do you see India as one of the most exciting markets that you're in right now?
India, yes. We're very pleased with India. We've done something important in Mexico as well recently with the pension funds there. So we are being very opportunistic about finding the right partners again and looking at those markets for these great platforms that will give us really good projects and that are going to be extremely helpful in terms of broadening our space, our footprint globally.
Great. Jim, going back to talking about the governance side and the unique structure that Hoop has, what are some of the challenges that you see both either on the governance side for yourself with regards to labor and management, or with regards to some of the demographic challenges we were talking about a little bit earlier?
Well, first of all, talking about governance, I mean, we have a very different governance structure. I mean, the structure, the legal structure of the plan is quite different than other plans that we were. It surprises most people to find that the Hoop is actually a private trust. So it was created initially by an agreement between the Ontario Hospital Association and the four founding unions, which is OPSU, QP, SEIU, and ONA. The Ontario Nurse Association, and so they're actually the sponsors of the trust, and they each select board members. So our board is made up of half of appointees of the OHA, and each of the unions appoint 2 members. So that governance structure, people kind of think of it as being a lay board. It's not really. I mean, I think the board is actually quite professional. I mean, all the people that are appointed are well-educated people, and they're so they do contribute well to the success of the plan. And as you said, I mean, I think if you're in one of our board meetings, you really have trouble figuring out who is a union representative and who is a management representative. I mean, they all act in the interest of the plan, and then part of that is, the structure is a trust. So under trust law, they're required to focus on the interest of the members. And that overall structure is quite interesting because, in fact, it's like a mutual insurance structure where the members of the plan effectively own the plan. So it's so unlike other organizations where you may have trying to serve 2 masters. If you're a corporate plan, you might be try to get a good return for your shareholders, plus try to support your clients. And in this case, the clients and the owners are one and the same. So you don't have this split allegiance. So we're focused solely on making sure we can deliver the pension to the members, and so there's no inconsistency there at all. I think that removes a lot of governance challenges. I think and I think one of the great benefits of that, Hoop is again, and most of the provincial plans are like this. They're not government guaranteed plans. So in fact, because we're a private trust, there is no government guarantee on our plan. The only obligation of the employer is if we have a funding challenge in the future, we may have to raise the contribution rate. So that's the only. So there's nobody out there that's going to write a check if we become underfunded, which tends to focus your attention on risk management. Another powerful tool we have is we have flexible benefits. So our board has the ability to set the price and benefits, but they also have the ability to. So we have a conditional benefit. So we have conditional cost of living for pension members, which is a very powerful lever if we needed to use it. So we don't ever want to have to use that, but it's available to the board if we had to. And the reason why we've been able to do that is because labor's allowed us to have that lever because they have a seat at the table. So when we're making that decision, they're part of that decision, and they're going to make sure that's been done in the interest of the members. So I think that joint governance structure actually is a great benefit to all the members because, again, of having that lever allows us to charge way less for the plan through people's working careers, so which is good for everybody. And the trade-off is that if we had a difficult period during people's retirement, we may have to reduce the cost of living adjustment for a period of time. But our intention is always to recover that and get back to 100% cost of living adjustment. So governance has been, I think, that joint governance structure has actually worked extremely well, and it's been a real benefit to the plan. Sorry, I forgot the second part of your question. But,
It was just talking about what some of the challenges are going forward in terms of the governance structure. Do you see any stresses on that, or do you also see it as an opportunity for Labour to actually play a little bit of a stronger role in the economy, where it's a lot of people define one of the great challenges that we have going forward in terms of dealing with some of the economic pressures is that we've got to find a greater role for Labour in different elements of our society in order to strengthen the economy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we see our role as being trying to strengthen the economy. I mean, our role is, our main focus is, again, making sure we can deliver on pensions to our members. But again, I think Labour has played a very important role in making sure that people have pension plans. I mean, there's a very high correlation between people who have defined benefit plans and organized labor. So it's I think organized labor has recognized the value of these plans and has been very instrumental in the creation of the plans and maintaining the plans. And they've also been very good at educating their members in the benefits of the plans and the use of the plans. So, HOOP is actually a voluntary plan. And so the employer can, when they join, all the full-time employees of the employer become members of the plan, or required to become members of the plan. But the part-time employees actually can choose to be in the plan or not. And Labour's played a great role in actually educating the part-time employees at hospitals and other healthcare institutions on the benefits of the plan. And they've so we have a significant number of part-time members who have voluntarily joined the plan. So it's about I think it's about a third of our population roughly fits into that category. So and really that's been driven by education has been done by Labour of their members and getting to understand the value of being in the plans.
Great. Hugh, I was really interested when you were talking about, and I know that you and I have spoken before about innovation, how important that is, which is ironic because I don't think a lot of people would think of pension plans as being, forces for innovation in a knowledge economy. But the notion of you saying that you want to be a global pension citizen, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about where you see those innovations in terms of your own planning. Because I think actually one of the best things I think that we all could hope that would come out of this is, it's one thing to say that you want to build capacity building in nations, but to be able to partner and do pilot projects and help emerging economies be able to kind of learn from all the mistakes that we've made, but also be able to kind of leapfrog ahead of that in terms of the structure of setting up a pension plan, but then you being able to also tap into innovative aspects of their emerging economies. If you could talk a little bit about where you see that trend and how it has a positive effect on where you want to go at OP Trust.
Well, I think there are many positive attributes to the paper that Commonwealth prepared, but one thing I think that really is a central lesson is it's a story of innovation, but the critical part in innovation that it sets out is that there were failures. Innovation comes from failure. It comes from learning from your mistakes, understanding what they are, and moving forward. And it's because of that foundation on innovation that Canadian pension plans, I think, are the beacons around the world. And for us at OP Trust, we want to adopt an innovation mindset. Disruptive technologies are here. They are changing the very nature of how we do things, how the economy functions. And what we need to do as an organization is develop an innovative mindset. We need to understand we have to learn from our failures. We have to accept that we're going to have certain failures, small failures, one hopes. But we are going to have them. And we're also, innovation is going to affect the way we invest, because right now our investors focus on tangible items, the cash flows, accounts receivable, customer bases, those traditional ways of assessing the future and value of a company. As we move forward, disruption is going to affect that. We're going to have to develop the skills to look into the future, to have intangible skills where we can value assets. When you look at the emerging world, those economies are much more nimble than ours. They're much more able to adopt new technologies. If you look at the way banking works in the emerging world, they do it on their phones. They don't have branch networks. This is coming to Canada. The way the Nigerian pension system functions is off the phone system and the use of the equivalent of iTunes cards. These are important lessons for us to learn so that we can do our jobs as we work at OP Trust. We're more creative. We can see the future. We can help our members face the future, and we can make sure that we do more interesting things and we do better things. And I think we're also trying to contribute to the innovation economy. We've established an incubation portfolio, which is going to have small pilot project investments in areas where we don't traditionally invest, to see if we can learn new skills, to see if we can scale those skills up. And we also think in certain parts of the economy, especially in late-stage emerging growth, late-stage venture companies, that also has the ability not only to earn us outsized returns, but to make a contribution to the Ontario economy and the Canadian economy, and we think that's important.
It's so well said. It's great. We actually have to end the conversation now, which is too bad, because I think a number of us could talk pensions for quite some time. I really do want to thank all four of you for participating in this study. I really want to thank the province of Ontario for supporting it, and the World Bank as well. This is the kind of work that we do so well together, but it takes an enormous amount of time and effort to do it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being interested and for being here. And thank you, the World Bank, for sponsoring it. I hope we can meet again next year and we can announce some pilot projects with emerging countries, because I think that's what Canada does best. So thank you all. Thanks.
And thank you, Terrie.
Thank you, Terrie. I love that.
Esteemed panelists, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I would like to thank you for engaging us in a rich discussion on a topic that is so important to all of us. You've certainly given us a lot of food for thought, especially as we consider the future pension needs of our aging population. Ms. Hogan, Mr. Levy, we appreciated the insights shared in the World Bank Group report. It provided the perfect context for the ensuing discussion. Presenters and panelists, we wish you all continued success in your distinctive and influential roles. And to our moderator, Ms. O'Leary, we are grateful for your skillful navigation of our dynamic panelists and engaging topic. Before we conclude, here are some highlights of upcoming club events. On Monday, November 27th, Toronto Mayor, His Worship John Tory, will be at our podium. And on Thursday, November 30th, Mr. Andrew Scheer, Leader of the Official Opposition and Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, will join us. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I would like to extend another round of thanks to today's event sponsors, EY and Torys LLP. We would also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at CanadianClub.org. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We hope to see you again soon. Enjoy your day.